My mother-in-law tried to destroy my wedding with fake evidence of my cheating. Now she wants my help after ruining her daughter's career. I'm struggling to not laugh in her face. I never thought I'd be the one writing one of these posts. For years of watching my MIL play favorites with her kids, manipulate everyone around her, and make my life a living hell. Never in a million years would I have guessed she'd end up on my doorstep begging for MY help. Sometimes karma really does come back around. Asterisk. Alright, so I, 31F, met my now husband Alex, 33M, at an architecture conference in Boston 5 years ago. I was presenting my downtown revitalization project, and he was there representing his firm. We literally bumped into each other at the coffee station. I spilled coffee all over his presentation notes and spent the next hour helping him recreate his talking points. We exchanged numbers, had dinner that night, and honestly, it was like finding the missing piece I never knew I needed. Alex grew up in this picture-perfect New England family, or so I thought. His father passed when he was in college, leaving behind his mom Martha, 58F, and younger sister Valerie, 29F. From the outside, they seemed like this tight-knit, supportive unit. Martha was this elegant, well-connected woman who threw amazing dinner parties and seemed to know everyone in Boston's social circles. Valerie was also in architecture, but worked mainly on residential projects, while Alex and I focused on commercial and public spaces. I guess I should mention my own background because it matters for context. I grew up with just my mom in a tiny rental outside Pittsburgh. My dad split when I was 3. Classic deadbeat story. Mom worked double shifts as a nurse to put me through school. I busted my ass for a scholarship to state college and worked evenings at a campus cafe to cover rent. Architecture was always my escape. I'd spend hours sketching buildings and spaces where people could feel safe and connected. I graduated top of my class and moved to Boston for my first real job, living on ramen and determination until I started climbing the ladder. The first few times I met Martha, she was polite. Never warm exactly, but civil. She'd ask these really specific questions about my background that felt a bit like job interview questions. Where did I grow up? A small town outside Pittsburgh with my single mom. Where did I go to school? State school on scholarship. What did my family do? Mom was a nurse. Looking back, I realized she was assessing if I was good enough for her precious son. I remember this super uncomfortable moment at one of her dinner parties where she introduced me to everyone as Alex's friend from work. We'd been dating for 6 months at that point, when Alex corrected her. Actually, Mom, Lauren is my girlfriend. She laughed this weird, tinkling laugh and said, "Oh, well, titles aren't important, are they?" Then she literally steered the conversation away by asking someone about their vacation. Alex squeezed my hand under the table. I should have seen the red flag the size of Texas waving in my face. Things started getting weird when we got more serious. Alex took me to his family lake house for a long weekend, and Martha spent the entire time telling stories about Alex's ex, Diane. Oh, Diane used to make the best blueberry pancakes right here in this kitchen. Diane was such a strong swimmer, she'd be out on the lake for hours. It was beyond awkward, but I tried to laugh it off. Then came this dinner at Martha's house where she accidentally invited Diane. Who does that? There was Diane, sitting at the table when we arrived, looking just as uncomfortable as we were. But the weirdest part? Valerie and Martha acted like this was completely normal. Alex was furious, and we left immediately, with him apologizing the whole way home. I'll admit I cried that night. Not because I felt threatened by Diane, who seemed nice enough and clearly had no idea what was happening either, but because I realized the uphill battle I was facing. Martha had decided I wasn't good enough because I didn't come from money or the right connections. And what hurt worse was watching how this affected Alex, the guilt and conflict on his face as he tried to navigate between the women in his life. That should have been my first real warning about what I was getting into, but I was stupidly in love and thought we could handle anything together. God, that sounds so cheesy now, but it's true. When you're in that honeymoon phase, you think love conquers all or whatever. Turns out love needs to be armed with boundaries and a spine of steel when dealing with toxic family. After the Diane dinner, Alex had a serious talk with his mom. He told me he made it clear that her behavior was unacceptable and that if she wanted him in her life, she needed to respect me and our relationship. Martha apparently cried and played the lonely widow card, saying she was just trying to keep their family traditions alive. She promised to be more considerate. And for a few weeks, she actually was. But then came the passive-aggressive comments. "Oh, Lauren, that outfit is so bold. I could never pull something like that off at my age." Or, "Alex always loved home-cooked meals growing up. Do you cook much?" said while watching me eat the takeout I brought over after working a 12-hour day. It was death by 1,000 tiny cuts, each one plausibly deniable. Valerie was trickier. Sometimes she seemed genuinely friendly, inviting me to grab coffee or asking my opinion on design concepts. But there was always this undertone of competition, especially around anything to do with architecture. If I mentioned a project I was working on, she'd immediately bring up something bigger or more prestigious she was involved with. At first, I thought maybe it was just professional rivalry, but I started noticing how she'd glance at her mother for approval after these little one-up moments. Fast forward 6 months, and Alex proposed during a weekend trip to Maine. It was perfect, private, meaningful, and exactly what I would have wanted. We were walking along this deserted beach at sunset, and he got down on one knee with this vintage ring that had belonged to his grandmother. I was over the moon until we told his family. Martha's reaction? "Oh. Well, that's certainly soon." Valerie actually laughed and said, "Well, let's see if this one sticks." Alex defended me, but the damage was done. I spent the car ride home wondering if there was something I didn't know about Alex's relationship history. Had he been engaged before? He swore he hadn't, which made Valerie's comment even stranger. The next day, Martha called with a complete 180 in attitude. Suddenly, she was all in on the wedding planning. She had venues to suggest, florists to recommend, even a binder of ideas she'd apparently been keeping for Alex's future wedding. I found out later she'd made this binder when he was dating Diane. She wanted to come dress shopping with me, and my mom wanted to host an engagement party at her club, wanted to invite all these people I'd never even met. It was overwhelming, and honestly a bit suspicious given her initial reaction. Alex thought she was making an effort to be supportive, but something felt off. When I gently suggested we wanted a smaller, more intimate wedding, she looked at me like I'd suggested we get married in a dumpster. Martha offered to help with wedding planning, which basically meant taking over and ignoring everything I wanted. When we politely declined and said we were planning something small, she lost it. Tears, accusations that I was cutting her out of her only son's big day, the works. Alex stood firm. God, I love that man. And we decided on a small ceremony at a boutique hotel with just 50 guests. Martha's response? She started calling my relatives, to discuss concerns about the rushed nature of our engagement. My mom called me in tears after Martha suggested to her that Alex might be feeling pressured and that, as parents, they should guide us toward a longer engagement. My cousin told me Martha had asked if I had always been impulsive or if this was new behavior. She was literally trying to make me sound unstable. Things got so bad that Alex and I considered eloping. We were both stressed, arguing about things that didn't matter, and the joy was being sucked out of what should have been a happy time. One night, after a particularly nasty phone call from Martha, she'd found out we hadn't reserved seats for her club friends and accused me of social sabotage. I broke down. I told Alex maybe this was too much, that I loved him but didn't know if I could spend my life fighting his mother. That was a turning point for Alex. He drove to Martha's house that night and told her that if she didn't back off, she wouldn't be invited to the wedding at all. He told me later that she acted shocked, like she couldn't possibly understand why he was so upset. "I'm just trying to give you the wedding you deserve," she'd said. Alex replied, "No, you're trying to create the wedding you want, and you're hurting the woman I love in the process." After that, Martha took a different approach. She became eerily pleasant, agreeing to everything with a tight smile and comments like, "Whatever makes you happy, dear." She stopped calling me directly and instead worked through Valerie, who suddenly wanted to be my new best friend. Looking back, I should have recognized the calm before the storm. But I was just so relieved to not be fighting anymore that I missed the signs of what was coming. This is where things get truly insane. About 3 weeks before the wedding, Alex's best friend Sam, 27M, asked to meet him for a drink. Sam had been distant lately, which was weird since he was supposed to be Alex's best man. Sam and Alex had been friends since college. They'd been roommates, best friends, practically brothers. Sam was always the struggling one though. Brilliant but constantly underemployed, floating between junior positions at smaller firms while Alex's career took off. I should mention that Sam had been going through hell the past year. His mom was diagnosed with cancer and needed expensive treatments their insurance wouldn't fully cover. He was drowning in medical bills and had recently been laid off from his latest job during company downsizing. He'd been crashing on our couch for a few weeks until he found a new place he could afford, and Alex had been helping him financially without making a big deal of it. This context makes what happened next even more heartbreaking. At this meeting, Sam showed Alex photos of me leaving a hotel with another man. The photos showed someone with similar hair and build from behind, wearing a coat I owned. Alex immediately knew something was off and confronted Sam, who broke down completely. He admitted that Martha had approached him during his most desperate moment, right after he'd been served an eviction notice and his mom's condition had worsened. Martha had offered to not only help him get a job at a prestigious firm but also to pay for his mother's treatment at a specialized clinic if he helped open Alex's eyes about me. According to Sam, Martha had played on his insecurities, suggesting that I was changing Alex, pulling him away from his real family, including Sam. She convinced him that he'd be helping his friend in the long run. Sam had been following me for weeks, trying to catch me doing something wrong. The one time he thought he had evidence was actually just me meeting my cousin who was visiting from California. I still get chills thinking about this. Like, my future mother-in-law was so desperate to break us up that she hired someone to stalk me. And not just anyone, but Alex's best friend. She literally exploited a desperate situation, a man watching his mother die while facing financial ruin, to manipulate him into betraying his best friend. The violation, the breach of trust, the absolute insanity of it. I can't even put into words how violated this made me feel. For weeks after learning this, I'd find myself checking over my shoulder when I was out alone, wondering if I was still being watched. Alex was torn apart by his friend's betrayal, but he was also heartbroken for Sam. He understood the impossible position his friend had been put in, even though he couldn't forgive what he'd done. Instead of coming straight to me, Alex went to confront his mother. Martha didn't even deny it. She justified manipulating Sam by saying she was protecting Alex from making a terrible mistake and that she'd seen girls like me before, who were just using him for his family connections and money. When Alex pointed out how she'd exploited Sam's desperate situation with his sick mother, she dismissed it as just business and said Sam was weak for confessing. When Alex defended me, she played the "I'm just a concerned mother" card and actually started crying about how no one appreciates everything I sacrifice for this family. That night, Alex came home and told me everything. I was in shock. Who does this kind of thing? What kind of mother tries to frame her son's fiancé as a cheater? What kind of person exploits someone's dying mother as leverage? I wanted to confront her, but Alex asked me to let him handle his family. After much discussion, Alex uninvited Martha from the wedding. The situation with Sam was more complicated. Despite the betrayal, Alex couldn't bring himself to completely abandon his friend in his time of need. Instead of having Sam as best man, Alex arranged for him to receive treatment for his mother at the specialized clinic anyway, making it clear this was a humanitarian gesture, not forgiveness. He told Valerie she could only come to the wedding if she respected our relationship. You should have seen the texts and voicemails that followed. Martha cycled through every manipulation tactic in the book. Anger, after everything I've done for you. Guilt, you're breaking your mother's heart. Martyrdom, I guess I'll just be alone while you start your new family. Pity, my friends will all be asking why I'm not there. And finally threats, you'll regret cutting me out of your life when you realize what she really is. Alex blocked her number after that last one. I remember how his hands were shaking as he did it, and how quiet he was that night. He's always been close to his mom, especially after losing his dad, and this was tearing him apart. But he never wavered in his support of me, not once. The wedding was beautiful without Martha's drama, though Valerie spent most of it looking uncomfortable and left early. We took off for a honeymoon in Greece, which I'd been saving for since before I met Alex, despite Martha's implications that he was paying for everything, and for 2 weeks, we existed in this perfect bubble away from all the toxicity. When we got back, real life resumed. We moved into a small but charming apartment, throwing ourselves into work and our new life together. We tried to move forward, keeping minimal contact with Martha. Alex would occasionally meet her for lunch, but I kept my distance. Things were actually peaceful for about a year. Then I got a huge opportunity at work, the chance to lead a major downtown renovation project. It was exactly the kind of project I dreamed of, with a focus on sustainable design and community spaces. I was thrilled until I found out Valerie was also being considered for the project lead. I didn't think much of it at first. May the best architect win, right? But then weird things started happening. Design concepts I'd shared confidentially with a firm's partners somehow leaked to competing firms. My presentation files got corrupted the night before a big client meeting. And I started hearing rumors that I was difficult to work with and not a team player. I remember this one day I came back from lunch to find my desk had been accessed and my primary design folder was open. Nothing was missing that I could tell, but someone had definitely been looking through my work. I started password protecting everything after that and keeping backups on an external drive I took home with me. After weeks of this, one of the junior architects pulled me aside and awkwardly told me that Valerie had been speaking badly about me to anyone who would listen, claiming I had stolen design concepts from her in the past and that I was manipulating people to get ahead. The kicker? She implied it was well known that I had cheated on Alex before our wedding but had somehow convinced him to stay. I was livid. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was my career, my reputation. I confronted Valerie directly, which she clearly wasn't expecting. She denied everything at first, then switched to saying she was just repeating what she'd heard. When I pressed her on who exactly she'd heard this from, she admitted it was Martha. That night, I told Alex everything. His face went through this series of emotions that would have been comical in any other situation: disbelief, confusion, anger, and finally, this cold determination I'd never seen before. He called Valerie immediately while I sat next to him. I could hear her voice getting higher and more panicked as the conversation went on. Alex didn't yell. That almost made it scarier. He just said, in this deadly calm voice, that she had 24 hours to retract every lie she'd told about me to everyone she'd told it to, or he would personally go to her firm's partners and tell them exactly what kind of unethical behavior their employee was engaging in. The next day, Valerie came to my office and apologized in front of my entire team. She admitted there was no truth to any of the rumors and that she was sorry for her unprofessional behavior. It was clearly rehearsed and not particularly sincere, but it did clear my name publicly. The partners ended up splitting the project between us, which wasn't ideal but was better than losing it entirely. Valerie and I established a cold but professional working relationship. We stayed in our lanes and delivered a successful project, though it was stressful having to double-check everything constantly. What Valerie didn't count on was that her behavior had been noticed by the firm's partners. While I kept my head down and focused on the work, she'd shown her true colors. When the next round of promotions came, I was made a senior partner while Valerie was passed over. The official reason was that they wanted someone who demonstrated collaborative leadership, which was a professional way of saying her backstabbing had backfired. Valerie quit 2 weeks later and took a position at a smaller firm. I think she expected to make a fresh start there, but architecture is a smaller world than people realize, not tiny, but connected through projects, clients, and professional organizations. People move between firms and take their experiences and relationships with them. What really damaged Valerie's reputation wasn't just her behavior toward me. After she left, several junior architects came forward about how she'd taken credit for their work. 2 clients complained about confidentiality issues where their requirements had somehow leaked to competitors. The firm did a quiet investigation and found evidence that Valerie had been using company resources for freelance side jobs, a big no-no in our contracts. None of this was made public. The firm wanted to avoid scandal, but word travels in professional circles. Her problems at the new firm weren't immediate. For about 8 months, things seemed to be going okay for her from what we heard through mutual connections. Then came a situation involving a major client, an arts foundation that was building a new museum. Apparently, Valerie presented some distinctive design elements that were nearly identical to concepts from her previous firm, our firm. The client happened to be friends with one of our partners who recognized the work. There was a copyright issue, the client pulled out, and Valerie's new firm lost a 7-figure contract. That's when her professional reputation really started to crumble. It wasn't just about her being difficult anymore, it was about being a liability. Her new firm didn't fire her immediately, but they sidelined her to small, low-profile projects. After a few more months of this professional purgatory, there was an incident with missing design files that the firm couldn't prove was her doing, but strongly suspected. That's when they finally let her go, citing ethics violations broadly to avoid potential legal issues. For nearly 6 months, we enjoyed the silence. No Martha, no drama. Alex occasionally heard from Valerie, who was struggling at her new firm, but we kept our distance. We bought a beautiful old Victorian house that needed renovation, a perfect project for 2 architects, and we're finally feeling settled. Our house became our sanctuary and passion project. Every weekend was spent tearing down walls, refinishing hardwood floors, or hunting for period-appropriate fixtures at salvage yards. Alex is amazing with structural work, while I have a better eye for finishing details. We were so in sync during this time, laughing, creating, building our dream home together. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. We've been trying for a baby during this time too, though we hadn't told anyone. After a year of negative tests, we saw a specialist who told us our chances were low due to some issues on my side. It was heartbreaking, but we started discussing other options: adoption, fostering, or maybe just being the cool aunt and uncle to our friends' kids. We were sad but at peace with whatever path our family would take. Then, last week, Martha showed up at our door unannounced. She looked terrible, tired, and much older somehow. She asked if she could come in, and against my better judgment, I let her. Here's the kicker. Valerie had been struggling professionally for almost 2 years now. After bouncing between temporary positions and freelance gigs, she'd finally landed a promising opportunity at a mid-sized firm 3 months ago. But according to Martha, Valerie had just been let go again. This time, she'd gotten into a heated argument with a senior architect who had criticized her work, and she'd responded by sending a scathing email to the entire office about the toxic culture. It wasn't that Valerie was completely unhireable in the architecture world at large, but she developed a reputation specifically in Boston's architecture scene as being difficult and untrustworthy. Martha wanted us, specifically Emmy, to put in a good word for Valerie at my firm, arguing that she deserved another chance, and that everyone makes mistakes. When I asked why on earth she thought I would do that after everything they'd put me through, she had the audacity to say, "Because we're family, and families forgive each other." I laughed. I actually couldn't help it. This woman who had tried to destroy my relationship, who had accused me of cheating, who had helped her daughter try to ruin my professional reputation, was now asking for MY help because they had nowhere else to turn. But then Martha went further. She said she'd heard we were having fertility issues. How did she even know that? And suggested that helping Valerie might bring good karma for starting a family. She actually implied that my infertility might be karmic punishment for Valerie's career problems. I felt like I'd been slapped. Alex, who had come home during this conversation, told his mother that she needed to leave. He said he loved her because she was his mother, but he couldn't stand by while she continued to disrespect his wife. He told her that until she could sincerely apologize and change her behavior, she wasn't welcome in our home. After Martha left, Alex held me while I cried, not because of anything Martha had said, but because I hated seeing the pain in his eyes as he had to choose between his wife and his mother. That night, He told me something he never shared before. His father's last words to him had been a warning about Martha. "Don't let her control your life the way she controlled mine," he'd said. Alex had been 17 and hadn't understood what his father meant until he met me and saw Martha's response. The next day, Martha sent a group email to Alex, me, and Valerie. It was this weird mix of non-apology, "I'm sorry you felt hurt by my actions," and justification, "Everything I've done has been out of love for my children." She suggested family therapy, with the therapist being her friend from church. Alex and I didn't respond. Valerie, however, called Alex directly. To our surprise, she broke down and admitted that she'd always felt second best to him, and that much of what she'd done was trying to win Martha's approval. She said she was starting therapy on her own and wanted to apologize properly someday when she'd done the work to understand why she'd behaved the way she did. Alex was cautiously optimistic, but told her we needed time and space. Martha left in tears, and Alex has been quiet ever since. I know he's hurting. It's his mother after all. But I'm struggling to find any sympathy for either Martha or Valerie. They made their beds, and now they're lying in them. Part of me feels validated that their schemes finally caught up with them, but another part feels guilty for feeling that way. Alex assures me I have nothing to feel guilty about, but it's hard not to when I see how this continues to hurt him. I don't know what happens next. Will Martha finally realize she needs to change? Will Valerie learn from her mistakes? I'm not holding my breath. But for now, Alex and I are standing firm on our boundaries. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd run the other way when those red flags first appeared. But then I look at Alex, at the life and home we've built together. And I know that some things are worth fighting for, even if it means going to war with your mother-in-law.